"You said I'd never give him a future," Marcus Carter whispered as he stared through the rain-soaked glass of his mansion. "But you never stayed long enough to see me build one." 12 years earlier, there had been no mansion, no polished marble floors, no sprawling oak trees lining a private driveway stretching nearly 200 feet from the front gate. There had only been a rundown apartment on the west side of Charlotte, North Carolina, where old pipes rattled every winter and the hallway always smelled faintly of bleach and worn carpet. Marcus was 26 then, a poor black single father in everything but blood. The night changed forever with 3 quiet knocks on his apartment door just after midnight. At first, he thought he imagined them. His shift cleaning office buildings had ended less than an hour earlier, and exhaustion weighed on every muscle in his body. But the sound came again, softer this time, deliberate. He unlocked the door and froze. Sitting on the faded welcome mat was a small baby carrier wrapped in a blue blanket already damp from the cold October drizzle. Inside, a baby boy blinked up at him with wide brown eyes before letting out a trembling cry that echoed through the empty hallway. Marcus looked left, then right. No footsteps, no waiting car, no shadow disappearing around the corner. Only the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the cracked concrete outside. Resting beneath the blanket was a white envelope with his name written across it in handwriting he recognized instantly. Emily Brooks. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. It contained only one sentence. "You'll never give him the life he deserves, and I can't spend my future waiting to find out." Marcus read it again, then once more. The words felt colder than the rain itself. Emily hadn't asked him to forgive her. She hadn't explained where she was going. She hadn't even signed the note. She had simply walked away from both of them. The baby whimpered louder, tiny fingers curling around the edge of the blanket as though searching for someone who was already gone. Marcus slowly knelt beside the carrier. "Hey there," he whispered, his voice cracking despite every attempt to stay calm. "Looks like it's just you and me now." The baby stopped crying for a brief second, staring into Marcus's tired face with innocent curiosity. In that quiet moment, something invisible shifted. Marcus had every reason to close the door, call social services, and tell himself he wasn't ready for a child. He barely earned enough to cover rent. His refrigerator held little more than milk, eggs, and leftover rice. His old pickup truck stalled almost every other morning. He owned 2 pairs of work boots, both patched with duct tape. Yet none of those thoughts survived longer than a heartbeat. He lifted the baby into his arms with surprising gentleness, feeling the tiny heartbeat against his chest. "I'm Marcus," he said softly. "I don't know if I'm the father you were supposed to have, but I promise you this. You'll never wonder if someone loves you." Outside, the rain continued falling over the sleeping city, washing away tire tracks that no one would ever follow. Upstairs, a lonely apartment suddenly felt different. It was still small, still cold, still uncertain, but for the first time in years, it held something stronger than fear. It held a promise that would take 12 years, countless sacrifices, and more courage than Marcus could possibly imagine to keep. The first weeks felt less like a new beginning and more like a daily test of endurance. Marcus learned quickly that babies did not care whether the rent was due, whether the electricity bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter, or whether their caretaker had slept only 3 hours after working an overnight cleaning shift. Noah cried when he was hungry, smiled when he felt safe, and reached for Marcus with complete trust, as though the choice had already been made for both of them. Every morning before sunrise, Marcus warmed a bottle on the tiny stove in his apartment, wrapped Noah in the same blue blanket he had arrived with, and carried him 2 blocks to Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, a retired elementary school teacher who watched children for families that could not afford daycare. She charged almost nothing, often refusing extra cash whenever Marcus insisted. "You keep saving for that little boy," she would say with a gentle smile. "He is going to need more than today." Marcus nodded every time, even though he had no idea how tomorrow would look. His routine became as steady as the ticking clock hanging above the apartment sink. He worked nights cleaning downtown office buildings until 5 in the morning, slept for 2 hours after dropping Noah off, delivered groceries during the afternoon, and spent evenings studying free online business courses at the public library, while Noah played quietly beside him with donated picture books. Library employees began recognizing them. Some smiled when Noah waved from his stroller. Others quietly left children's books on the corner table before Marcus even arrived. Little acts of kindness slowly stitched together a life that had once seemed impossible. There were difficult days too. One freezing January afternoon, Marcus opened his refrigerator and counted exactly 4 eggs, half a loaf of bread, and a gallon of milk that would expire in 2 days. He stared at the shelves for several long seconds before quietly closing the door. Noah, now almost 2 years old, toddled into the kitchen holding a stuffed elephant someone had donated at church. "Daddy hungry?" he asked with innocent concern. Marcus knelt until they were eye level and smiled despite the tightness in his chest. "Daddy is fine, buddy. Tonight we are having breakfast for dinner." Noah clapped excitedly as though scrambled eggs were the greatest meal in the world. Marcus laughed softly. Children had a remarkable way of turning ordinary moments into treasures adults often overlooked. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep curled beneath his favorite blanket, Marcus spread notebooks across the tiny kitchen table. Inside were handwritten ideas for a delivery business he dreamed of starting one day. He had noticed that many small companies struggled to move supplies quickly across Charlotte. If he could buy one reliable cargo van, maybe he could take weekend delivery jobs between cleaning shifts. It sounded impossible. His savings barely covered emergency expenses. Still, every week he placed $20 into an old coffee can hidden above the refrigerator. $20 became 40. 40 became 100. Months quietly turned into years. Noah grew taller, kinder, and endlessly curious, always asking why his father worked so hard. Marcus never complained. Whenever Noah asked whether they were poor, Marcus would smile and answer, "Money comes and goes, son. Character stays with you forever." Noah never fully understood those words. Not yet. But he remembered them every single time his father tucked him into bed before leaving for another long night of work, believing with all his heart that one promise made during a rainy October night was still worth every sacrifice. By the time Noah turned 12, the old coffee can above the refrigerator had long been replaced by framed business licenses hanging inside a modern headquarters overlooking Charlotte's growing skyline. Marcus never spoke about success as though it had arrived overnight, because he knew every achievement carried the fingerprints of thousands of ordinary mornings that no one else had witnessed. The first delivery van had been 12 years old, faded white, with more miles on the odometer than Marcus wanted to admit. It stalled twice during his first week in business and leaked oil onto nearly every driveway where he parked. Still, he treated every customer like they were his only client, arriving early whenever possible, carrying heavy boxes himself, and remembering names instead of invoice numbers. Word spread faster than any advertisement he could afford. Small businesses recommended him to larger ones. Larger companies noticed that Marcus Carter Logistics never missed a deadline. Within 5 years, 1 van became 3. 3 became 12. 12 became a fleet of bright blue trucks carrying his company logo across North Carolina and neighboring states. Yet nothing inside Marcus changed as much as the world around him expected. Every Friday afternoon, he still drove to Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins's little house with fresh groceries and flowers. She protested every single time. "Marcus, I told you years ago that watching Noah was never about money." He smiled while carrying bags into her kitchen anyway. "I know. That is why this is not payment. This is gratitude." Noah loved those visits. Mrs. Jenkins still kept his childhood drawings taped inside a kitchen cabinet, yellowed with age but carefully protected. She often laughed at the crooked stick figures Marcus had proudly labeled "me" and "Dad." Looking at them reminded Marcus that wealth had never been measured by bank accounts inside that tiny apartment. It had been measured by laughter echoing through rooms with secondhand furniture and mismatched dishes. Noah grew into a thoughtful young man, tall like Marcus, with quiet confidence that came from watching integrity practiced every single day instead of merely preached. He volunteered at local food drives, thanked every restaurant server by name, and held doors open without expecting recognition. Friends often assumed Marcus had raised him with strict rules. The truth was simpler. Noah copied what he saw. Every promise Marcus made, he kept. Every employee at the logistics company knew the owner would never ask someone else to perform work he refused to do himself. New hires were often surprised to find Marcus unloading trucks beside them during busy holiday seasons despite owning the company. One afternoon, Noah wandered into his father's office after school and noticed an old folded envelope resting inside the top drawer of Marcus's desk. Its edges had become worn and faded over the years. "Dad," Noah asked, "why do you keep that old letter if it makes you sad every time you look at it?" Marcus paused before answering. Sunlight poured through the office windows, reflecting across polished hardwood floors and family photographs lining the shelves behind him. One picture showed Noah wearing a Little League uniform. Another captured high school honor roll night. Every frame represented a memory Emily had never witnessed. Marcus slowly closed the drawer. "Because some things remind us where we started," he said quietly. Noah nodded, accepting the answer without asking another question, but Marcus could not ignore the feeling settling deep inside his chest. 12 years had passed without a single phone call, letter, birthday card, or apology. He had finally reached a place where the past no longer controlled his future. He believed that chapter had ended forever. What he did not know was that only a few miles away, another life had been unraveling one painful decision at a time, and before the week was over, the past would arrive at his front gate wearing a face neither of them could possibly forget. 3 days later, the sky over Charlotte wore the dull gray color that usually promised rain by late afternoon. Across town, Emily Brooks sat alone on a weathered bench outside a neighborhood employment center, clutching a paper cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The expensive life she had once believed would last forever had disappeared one quiet loss at a time. Her marriage to a wealthy real estate investor had ended years earlier. The luxury home had been sold. The vacations had become memories. Friends who once filled her calendar slowly stopped answering her calls. She had spent months searching for work, but a long gap in her resume and mounting debt closed more doors than they opened. Pride had faded long before hope did. That morning, she overheard 2 women discussing a charity luncheon hosted by one of the city's most respected business leaders. "I heard his company hires people who deserve a second chance," one woman said, while folding donated clothes into cardboard boxes. "Mr. Carter started with nothing. They say he never forgets where he came from." Emily barely looked up at first. Carter was a common last name. The conversation continued. "His estate is out on Providence Road. Big iron gates. You cannot miss it." She quietly memorized the address without knowing why. By late afternoon, she stood outside those very gates wearing a clean but worn navy coat donated by a local shelter. The mansion beyond the trees seemed almost unreal, its stone walls glowing softly beneath the overcast sky. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the long driveway, and an American flag moved gently in the cool breeze above the front entrance. Emily hesitated before pressing the security intercom. She almost walked away twice. Finally, she forced herself to speak. "Good afternoon," she said softly. "I heard the owner sometimes helps people find work. I am not asking for money. I just need an opportunity." A security officer listened patiently before responding with quiet professionalism. "Please wait here for a moment, ma'am." Minutes passed. Emily lowered her eyes, embarrassed by how desperately she hoped for a chance from a complete stranger. Inside the mansion, Marcus had just finished reviewing scholarship applications with Noah for the Carter Foundation's annual education program. Noah smiled as he stacked the folders into neat piles. "Dad, I still think Mrs. Alvarez should get approved. She reminds me of what you always tell me. Everybody deserves someone who believes in them." Marcus looked at his son with quiet pride. "That is exactly why I wanted you to help make these decisions." Before either of them could continue, Marcus's phone buzzed. The head of security spoke calmly. "Sir, there is a woman at the front gate asking for employment. She says she is willing to do any honest work available." Marcus glanced toward the window overlooking the long driveway. This was not unusual. The foundation received requests almost every week. "I will come speak with her myself," he answered. He slipped on a light jacket and walked toward the entrance while Noah remained inside organizing paperwork. The front door opened. Cool autumn air greeted Marcus as he stepped onto the stone walkway leading toward the gate. Leaves drifted quietly across the lawn. Each step felt ordinary until the security officer opened the gate. The woman slowly lifted her head. Time seemed to stop. Marcus recognized the familiar blue eyes before he noticed anything else. Emily stared back at him in complete disbelief, her lips trembling as recognition spread across her face. Neither of them spoke. The distance between them was barely 10 feet, Yet 12 years of silence suddenly stood in the space separating them. Emily's lips parted, but no words came. The confident young woman who had once walked away without looking back was gone. In her place stood someone worn down by years of disappointment, her shoulders slumped beneath a coat that could not keep out the autumn chill. Marcus remained perfectly still, his expression calm, almost unreadable. He had imagined this moment more than once during the early years, wondering what he might say if fate ever placed Emily in front of him again. Back then, anger always spoke first in his imagination. Now, standing before her after 12 years, he found only silence. Emily finally lowered her eyes. "Marcus," she whispered, barely able to say his name. I did not know this was your home." Marcus nodded once. "Neither did you expect me to have one." His voice was quiet, without bitterness, and somehow that hurt Emily even more than anger ever could have. She swallowed hard. "I heard the owner helped people. I was looking for work. I was not looking for." Her sentence faded into the cool afternoon air. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Time had changed both of them in different ways. The years had added confidence to his posture and peace to his voice. They had added regret to hers. Before either of them spoke again, the front door opened behind Marcus. "Dad," Noah called as he jogged down the stone steps with a folder tucked beneath his arm. "Mrs. Jenkins just called. She wants to know if we are still bringing dinner over tonight." Marcus turned instinctively toward his son, and a warm smile appeared across his face without effort. "Of course we are," he answered. "We never miss Friday." Noah reached the walkway and noticed the unfamiliar woman standing near the gate. He smiled politely, the same way his father had taught him to greet every stranger. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Emily stared at him as though the world had stopped spinning. His eyes, his smile, even the slight tilt of his head when he spoke. Pieces of a baby she had abandoned now stood before her as a kind, confident young man. She felt tears gather before she could stop them. Noah looked at Marcus with quiet curiosity. "Dad, is everything okay?" Marcus rested a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. "Everything is fine, son." Emily quickly wiped her eyes, embarrassed by the emotion she could no longer hide. He is a wonderful young man," she managed to say. Marcus looked at Noah with unmistakable pride. "Yes," he replied softly. "He really is." Emily's voice trembled. "You did that?" Marcus did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the oak trees lining the driveway, their golden leaves drifting slowly onto the perfectly kept lawn. "A lot of people helped us along the way," he finally said. "Good people who believed in us when life was difficult." Emily nodded, knowing she had not been one of those people. The realization settled heavily inside her heart. She had spent years chasing comfort, believing success belonged to those who chose the easiest path. Yet the man she had once dismissed had built a life rooted in sacrifice, loyalty, and love. She took one hesitant step forward before stopping herself. "Marcus," she said quietly, "there is something I need to tell him." Noah looked between them, confusion beginning to replace his polite smile. Marcus met Emily's eyes, and for the first time since she arrived, a flicker of concern crossed his face. He understood exactly what she meant, and he also understood that once those words were spoken, Noah's life would never be quite the same again. The wind moved quietly through the oak trees, carrying golden leaves across the stone driveway while no one spoke. Noah sensed something heavier than an ordinary conversation settling over the afternoon. He looked at his father first, then at the woman standing near the gate, whose eyes never seemed to leave his face. "Dad?" he asked gently. "Do you know her?" Marcus took a slow breath. There had been a time when he believed this moment would never come. He had imagined telling Noah the truth when he was older, wiser, stronger. But life rarely waited for perfect timing. Marcus rested his hand lightly on Noah's shoulder, the same reassuring gesture he had used since Noah was small enough to fit on one arm. "Yes," he answered quietly. "I know her." Emily closed her eyes for a brief second. Shame settled over her like the cool evening air. She had rehearsed 100 different apologies during lonely nights, yet now every carefully prepared sentence disappeared. Nothing sounded large enough to bridge 12 years of silence. "Finally," she whispered, "I have carried one regret every single day since I walked away." Marcus looked toward the horizon where dark clouds slowly drifted across the late afternoon sky. His voice remained steady. Emily, this conversation is not about easing your regret. It is about protecting his heart. Noah frowned slightly, confused but patient. He trusted Marcus enough to wait without interrupting. Emily nodded through quiet tears. You are right, she said. I lost the right to make this about me a long time ago. The silence returned. Somewhere beyond the front lawn, birds settled into the branches before the coming rain. The world seemed to slow around the three of them. Marcus finally turned toward Noah. Son, he said softly, there are parts of your story I plan to tell you someday. I just never expected someday to be today. Noah searched his father's face. For the first time in his life, he noticed something unfamiliar there, not fear, but careful sadness. Am I sick? Noah asked. Did something happen? Marcus smiled gently and shook his head. No, nothing like that. Emily's hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to speak, but every instinct told her this was Marcus's moment, not hers. He had earned it through 12 years of keeping promises she had abandoned. Marcus stepped a little closer to Noah. Do you remember what I always tell you? Noah answered without hesitation. Character stays with you forever. Marcus nodded proudly. Exactly. He looked briefly toward Emily before returning his attention to the boy he had raised. Today is another chance for all of us to choose character. Noah glanced again at the woman whose tears continued falling silently. Is she in trouble? He asked. Marcus looked at Emily with compassion instead of resentment. She needs kindness, he replied. Just like every person who has lost their way. Emily lowered her head, unable to hide her emotion any longer. She had expected rejection. She had expected anger. Instead, the man she had once underestimated stood before his son, teaching compassion at the very moment he had every reason to choose bitterness. That truth pierced her heart more deeply than any accusation ever could. Noah slowly walked toward the gate until only a few feet separated him from Emily. He offered a small, uncertain smile, the same warm smile Marcus had shown strangers for years. If you need help, he said sincerely, my dad usually finds a way. Emily covered her mouth as tears blurred her vision. Marcus closed his eyes for one brief moment. He realized then that the greatest success he had ever built was not the company behind him or the home surrounding them. It was the young man standing between the past and the future, unknowingly proving that love could become stronger than abandonment. Marcus drew a slow breath before breaking the silence that had settled over the driveway like the coming rain. Noah, he said gently, there is something you deserve to hear from me before anyone else speaks. The young boy looked at his father with complete trust, the same trust that had been built through thousands of bedtime stories, school mornings, scraped knees, birthday candles, and quiet conversations after difficult days. Marcus never looked away. The woman standing in front of you gave birth to you. The words floated through the cool afternoon air, simple and honest. Noah blinked once, trying to understand what they meant. He turned slowly toward Emily, whose tears now fell freely. She nodded with trembling lips. It is true, she whispered. I am your biological mother. Noah remained still. He did not rush forward. He did not step back. He simply looked from Emily to Marcus, searching for the face that had always held every answer in his life. Then, he asked softly, why have I never met her? Emily tried to speak, but emotion tightened her throat. Marcus answered instead, because when you were a baby, she made a decision to leave. I stayed. There was no accusation in his voice, only truth. Emily lowered her head. I believed money mattered more than love, she admitted quietly. I thought I was choosing a better future. Instead, I spent 12 years running away from the greatest mistake I ever made. Noah listened without interrupting. He had inherited Marcus's patience long before he ever knew where it came from. The wind lifted a few leaves across the stone path between them. Finally, Noah asked the question Marcus had feared for years. Dad, were you angry? Marcus smiled faintly. At first, yes. I was hurt. I was confused. But I learned something while raising you. Noah waited. Hate takes energy away from the people who need your love the most. Emily covered her face with both hands, unable to hide the quiet sob that escaped. Marcus continued, his eyes never leaving Noah. Every hour I could have spent hating someone became another hour teaching you to ride a bicycle, helping with homework, or cheering at your baseball games. I decided a long time ago that you deserved all of me, not whatever was left after bitterness. Noah's eyes began to glisten. Memories flashed through his mind like photographs turning inside an old album. His father waiting outside every school concert. Saturday mornings making pancakes shaped like baseballs. Long evenings practicing multiplication tables at the kitchen counter. The old pickup truck that smelled like fresh coffee before they could afford something newer. Every memory carried the same face, the same steady voice, the same man. Emily looked at Noah with hope so fragile it almost disappeared. "I do not expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I only wanted the chance to tell you that I have never stopped thinking about you." Noah took a slow step forward, but instead of walking toward Emily, he turned to Marcus. Without saying a single word, he wrapped both arms around the man who had raised him. Marcus embraced him tightly, closing his eyes as emotion quietly filled the space between them. Noah's voice was barely above a whisper. "You have been my father every single day of my life. Nothing can ever change that." Emily watched through tears, not with jealousy, but with understanding. For the first time in 12 years, she truly saw what Marcus had built. It was never the mansion behind him or the successful company carrying his name. It was a son whose heart had learned that love is measured by presence, sacrifice, and promises kept. Rain finally began to fall, not in heavy sheets, but in a soft, steady rhythm that seemed to quiet the entire estate. No one hurried inside. Marcus looked toward the security officer standing discreetly by the gate and gave a small nod. "Could you bring an umbrella, please?" A moment later, the officer returned with a large black umbrella. Marcus accepted it without a word and walked toward Emily. Instead of handing it to himself or Noah, he gently opened it above Emily's head. She looked up in surprise, unable to understand why the man she had wounded so deeply was still protecting her from something as simple as the rain. "You should not be standing out here in the cold," Marcus said calmly. Emily's eyes filled again. "After everything I did, you still care whether I get wet?" Marcus shook his head. "Kindness is not something I turn on only for people who deserve it. It is simply who I choose to be." Noah stood quietly beside them, listening to every word. He realized that his father was teaching him another lesson, not through a lecture, but through a single decision. Emily looked down at her worn shoes. "I have nowhere to go tonight," she admitted. "The shelter is full. I thought if I could find work, maybe I could afford a motel by next week." Marcus remained silent for several seconds. Years earlier, those words might have awakened old anger. Instead, they reminded him of nights when he had counted every dollar before buying groceries for Noah. He understood what desperation looked like because he had lived beside it. "Come inside," he said at last. Emily immediately shook her head. "No, I cannot ask that of you." "You did not ask," Marcus replied gently. "I offered." Noah smiled at his father with quiet admiration. "Mrs. Jenkins always says that a warm meal can give someone enough hope to face tomorrow." Marcus smiled back. "She is a wise woman." They walked slowly toward the front entrance together. Emily hesitated before stepping across the threshold, almost as though she believed she did not belong there. The house felt warm, carrying the familiar scent of fresh bread and cinnamon from the kitchen where dinner had been prepared earlier. Family photographs lined the hallway walls. Emily stopped in front of one picture showing Marcus and Noah standing beside an old white delivery van with broad smiles on their faces. "Was this your first truck?" she asked softly. Marcus nodded. "It broke down twice during the first week." Noah laughed. "Dad still refuses to sell it. He says it reminds him that small beginnings are nothing to be ashamed of." Emily studied the photograph for a long moment. Every picture she passed told the story of birthdays, graduations, fishing trips, school concerts, Thanksgiving dinners, and ordinary afternoons she had missed forever. There was no empty frame waiting for her, no place where she had ever belonged. Yet instead of making her feel unwelcome, the house quietly revealed something even more painful. Marcus had never built this life to prove her wrong. He had built it because a little boy needed someone who would never leave. They reached the dining room where 3 places had already been set at the table. Marcus quietly pulled out a 4th chair. Emily stared at it without moving. "I do not deserve to sit there," she whispered. Marcus looked at her with the same calm strength that had carried him through 12 difficult years. "Perhaps not because of yesterday," he said, "but everyone deserves the chance to become better than the person they were. The question is whether you are willing to begin today." Emily slowly took the seat, realizing that forgiveness was not being handed to her. It was inviting her to earn a different future, one honest step at a time. 1 year passed with the quiet certainty that real change was never measured in days, but in the choices repeated over time. Spring returned to Charlotte, covering the city with fresh green leaves and warm afternoon sunlight. At the Carter Foundation Community Center, families gathered for the annual scholarship celebration, filling the courtyard with laughter, conversations, and children chasing one another across the freshly cut grass. Marcus stood near the entrance, welcoming every guest with the same warm handshake that had built both his company and his reputation. Noah, now taller than his father remembered, helped younger students carry donated backpacks toward the registration tables. Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins sat beneath a white canopy, wearing her favorite blue cardigan, smiling proudly as she watched the family she had helped shape so many. Years ago, not far away, Emily arranged boxes of books inside the foundation library. She had accepted Marcus's offer to start over, not with special treatment, but with honest work. She arrived early every morning, stayed late whenever volunteers were needed, and never asked for recognition. Slowly, trust replaced pity. Respect replaced shame. Her apartment was small, her life simple, but for the first time in years, she earned every peaceful night's sleep. As the afternoon ceremony came to an end, Noah walked toward her carrying 2 cups of lemonade. "I thought you might be thirsty," he said with a gentle smile. Emily accepted the cup with grateful hands. "Thank you." The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt patient, like 2 people allowing time to heal what words never could. "I know we cannot get those years back," Emily said quietly. "I will never ask you to call me Mom. I only hope that one day, when you think about me, regret will not be the first thing you feel." Noah looked across the courtyard where Marcus laughed with a group of scholarship students. His father had become the kind of man who made everyone nearby feel seen. "Dad taught me something," Noah replied softly. He said forgiveness is not pretending the past never happened. It is refusing to let the past decide who you become. Emily felt tears fill her eyes once again, but this time they carried gratitude instead of despair. Marcus noticed them from across the lawn and walked over, sunlight reflecting softly across the silver threads beginning to appear near his temples. He looked at both of them before speaking. "Mrs. Jenkins is waiting for our annual family picture," he said with an easy smile. Noah laughed. "She will never let us leave without one." Marcus extended his hand toward Emily. She hesitated only for a moment before accepting it. Together they walked across the grass toward the old oak tree where Mrs. Jenkins had already positioned the photographer. As everyone gathered, Marcus stood beside Noah. Emily chose a place a respectful distance away, but Mrs. Jenkins smiled and gently motioned her closer. "Every story deserves room for redemption," she said. Warmly, Emily stepped forward, still uncertain, but no longer hiding. The camera shutter clicked just as a light breeze carried blossoms through the afternoon air. In the photograph, there were no winners and no losers. There was only a father who had kept his promise, a son who had learned that love is proven through faithfulness, and a woman who finally understood that the richest future is never built on comfort alone. As the sun settled behind the trees, Marcus looked at Noah with quiet pride, knowing the greatest legacy he would ever leave was not the company bearing his name or the home standing behind them. It was the heart of the young man beside him, a heart that had learned the strongest people are not those who hold on to anger, but those who choose compassion when life gives them every reason not to.